26. Arthur Livingston's old quarters on the third floor were untouched, aside from the man's personal effects having been cleaned out and the clothes donated. The man had owned a lot of suits. Zoey had never claimed the room for herself, she just found it creepy. That's why she didn't know that if you passed through Arthur's 500-square-foot walk-in closet, once full of hundreds of tailored suits, you'd find a slim, hidden door that led to a room full of wigs, fake facial hair, and shelves full of latex makeup appliances. The man had led a ridiculous life. Zoey sat in front of a vanity in said room, having Echo apply thin sections of latex to her cheeks. There was still a smelly ashtray on the counter where Arthur would apparently puff away at a cigar while he was getting his disguise applied. There should be a lot of blood and swelling around my nose. My whole face should be a mess, really. What time is it? 9:15. We're almost done. In the mirror, Zoey saw a mass of fake fur pass behind her. Wu in costume. Zoey said, "You're going to be hot in there." "I once took part in a firefight on a 100-degree day wearing a full biohazard suit," he said. "I will be fine." Will walked up, glancing at Zoey's reflection. They're almost done in the garage. Santa's workshop had spat out the last of the components of Zoey's Halloween costume, but a lot of assembly was still required. Andre and Carlton were snapping it together. "Also," he continued, "Andre has secured an infrared scanner that can penetrate walls. They'll be able to get an analysis of the screw's occupants from about 100 feet away. They just have to come up with a plan to get close enough to scan the building without drawing the notice of the dozen yellow jackets patrolling the grounds. No ambush this time. They're just in the open, waiting. Then our guys just have to find a cat-sized heat signature, right? Well, lots of the people who live in the screw presumably have pets, so we'll have to figure out how to narrow it down, protecting him without triggering a pitched battle with the VOP that leaves 30 people dead." "Right, because that would upset Stench Machine. What you're saying is that it's way better if they actually are bringing him to the costume contest." "You mean if they're using him as bait in what almost certainly is an ambush? Think about how Red Gun staged his attack yesterday, drawing what looked like random bystanders from the crowd. The Blowbacks people don't wear uniforms. For all we know, they actually have their 1,000-strong army, only interspersed through the park." "Yeah, that would be unfortunate. And even if there are 0 of them waiting there, there's still the bounty on your head. The moment word gets out that you're in the crowd, the same gaggle of possibly enhanced and probably drunk vigilantes will try to snatch you up to collect. It's very possible that Chob's mob doesn't intend to show up with the cat at all, that they only want to draw you into a public place and then let raw financial incentive wreak havoc for them. Do you have your necklace?" "You can see it on my neck, Will. Is my mother safe?" "Your mother is doing exactly what she wants, same as always. You understand the plan?" "I helped come up with it." He had a coin out now and was making it somersault across the top of the fingers on his right hand, his fancy way of fidgeting. It was driving Zoey nuts. "Actually, why don't you go help Echo figure out how the catnapper thwarted the estate's security? She has a theory, but you're not going to like it. As opposed to everything else I've heard today? She thinks the intruder snuck into the house days ago, or weeks ago even, came in with the crews that dropped off the Halloween supplies, or during some other routine maintenance, then just laid low until the right day. Then they wouldn't have had to worry about getting in when our guard was up, just getting out, which is in fact easier, if not exactly easy." "Wait, her theory is that I had some psychopath from the Blowback secretly living in my house with me for who knows how long? While I slept? While I took baths? And who knows what else?" "It's a big house. Security should have immediately detected another person, but if their gear is sophisticated enough, all measures have countermeasures. Again, remember who's pulling the strings behind all of this. I said you wouldn't like it." "Well, my mom always told me that when life is overwhelming, just pick one thing and worry about that. Block out everything else. For right now, we're getting Stench Machine back. That's her only job. Once that's done, we'll move on to the next thing. They want us to be frantic and confused. We have to respond by keeping focused. We're smarter than they are, right?" She dug into her pocket for her tube of her mother's pyramid scheme confidence daisy skin cream. She wondered how much you'd have to apply to get so confident that you just lose all awareness of your own mortality, because that's kind of what she needed right now. She actually looked for a label about dosage and instead only found a single warning in all caps. "Do not use on genitals." 27. The $10,000 Inappropriate Costume Contest was being held in the Arthur Livingston Memorial City Park, which meant making it through the Arthur Livingston Memorial City gridlock. This was the part of being an action hero nobody had ever told Zoey about, that half of the problem is always just getting there. As such, her ICC team was taking 3 vehicles to get to the site. Of the 3, Zoey's was by far the least secure, but also the most discreet. She was on the back of one of the city's electric pay-by-the-hour Vespa scooters, Wu weaving it around stalled traffic, Zoey trying to keep the fur of his costume out of her eyes. On one hand, leaving the house in anything that wasn't a luxury model military vehicle felt like she was cartwheeling down the street naked. On the other, after having gotten trapped inside the overturned armored van earlier, she decided she preferred the feeling of open air around her, passing through crowds as just another nobody on a scooter. She got some glances, but they were clearly reactions to the costume, not her. Echo's voice spoke from her earpiece. "The guy in the Zoey costume just went live on Blink. He's in the back seat of a car, saying he's heading to the park. The cat carrier is visible next to him." Zoey, hoping that her attached mic would discern her voice from the wind and traffic noises whooshing around them, said, "Can you see Stench Machine in the vehicle with him? If so, can you detect his mood?" No. The carrier is solid plastic on the top. That's all I can see at the moment. We're nailing down the make and model of the car." A moment later, head of security Hank Kowalski was patched into the line. "It's a black Geely Series X town car. We just grabbed it on a traffic cam on the corner of Rhodes Road and Streeter Pike. In front of and behind the sedan are armored VOP escort vehicles. 4 of them total. Who the hell is this guy? What are you people up to?" Zoey said, "We think they have my cat. To make myself feel better, I'm just going to tell myself that's code for something else." Echo said, "Do you know where the vehicle originated? Did they pick him up at the Screw? The old storage units on Avenue Lane?" "It emerged from a secure vehicle switch location." Zoey said, "Nobody else thinks it's strange that Chob's security team is escorting this random dropout kid to the costume contest? Just openly surrounding him in armored vehicles? Wasn't the whole point of riling up the trolls that he could wreak havoc from the shadows?" Before anyone could answer, Wu pulled onto the sidewalk and parked the scooter in the customary way, by disdainfully dumping it over right in the middle of where people were trying to walk. In this city, doing anything else would have drawn attention as aberrant behavior. He and Zoey walked the final 2 blocks to the park, hundreds of faces passing them on the sidewalk, every brief moment of eye contact stopping Zoey's heart for a beat. She imagined the whole crowd suddenly swarming her, burying her, tearing her to pieces. Instead, she passed through unmolested, shoulders brushing past her, Zoey feeling like a sausage rolling through a pack of hungry dogs. They arrived to find the park was a train wreck. Literally, that was the theme of this year's decorations. A locomotive accident with hundreds of gruesome fatalities. A line of smashed, overturned, and burning train cars, real ones, brought over from an abandoned rail yard, snaked through the park, partygoers shuffling around and climbing over them. Unsettlingly realistic corpses and severed limbs littered the ground. Massive zombie buzzards the size of pterodactyls swarmed overhead and occasionally swooped down on tattered leathery wings, snatching up some body part in a jagged beak and hauling it back into the sky. Again, Devil's Night was not for kids. Zoey jumped as the nearest corpse opened its mouth to speak. Then she saw that the mouths of all the mangled corpses were moving in mechanical unison. In a ghostly chorus, the dead announced that the inappropriate costume contest was due to start in 15 minutes. "The 5 vehicles in the Stench Machine convoy were just waved through the VOP security cordon," said Echo in Zoey's ear. "They're parking now. Looks like, I'm going to say, 8 guards." "Where?" "Northwest of you." "What am I, a goddamned mountain man?" Wu nudged her and pointed in the direction that was presumably northwest. They pushed their way through the crowd of costumes. She saw one guy dressed as Margot Gregor, a woman who made headlines for killing her 2 toddlers and stuffing them into an oven. The costume required 2 charred dolls. There was a couple's costume, Congressman Whitley and the teenage girl he had allegedly raped and murdered. The girl made up to look exactly like the recovered corpse as it appeared after 5 days in the Potomac, wrapped in garbage bags. Another corpse was dressed as Jesus and Muhammad in fetish gear. She saw a man in blackface and an orange afro dressed as pop star Latrell Larange, who had been arrested a few months ago for masturbating in public, and the man wearing the costume was crudely simulating that. Echo said, "You're almost there." Zoey already knew. Partygoers were turning, pointing, recoiling from a team of armed guards acting like Secret Service clearing the way for the damned president. Zoey pushed through gawkers and saw the kid in the bad Zoey Ash costume emerge, now about 50 feet away. And it was just a kid, maybe 18. He hadn't covered his face in anything but sloppily applied makeup he'd probably borrowed from his mom or girlfriend, including mascara applied to look like it was running, as if Zoey had been crying. He was saying something to one of the guards, and Zoey noticed he'd painted 3 of his teeth black, to look like they were missing. The real Zoey was missing a lower canine from a skateboarding accident than when she was a kid, and had a chipped incisor from a hard slap administered by a stepdad wearing a bulky class ring. Her tormentors loved to exaggerate her bad teeth, and that was the only reason Zoey hadn't gotten them fixed. Even though she'd had a couple of unrelated oral surgeries since inheriting the money, it would feel like giving in. Echo said, "Everyone is in position." Zoey momentarily panicked when she saw the kid had emerged without the cat crate, but he then turned and reached back into the vehicle and pulled it out. She caught hints of movement and fur through the narrow slots in the door and sides. Breathe. She forced herself to focus through a rage that was crawling through her body like fire ants. She wanted to run over and rip the carrier away from him, but took some pride in the fact that she knew better. The VOP team would cut her down before she took a step. Cool and methodical wins the race. As such, they had discussed every possibility for this part. That the crate would be empty, or contain a stuffed cat, or a bomb, or some prank device that sprayed acid or diarrhea in Zoey's face. The first step was to have Wu scan for "There is no explosive device," he said, his voice muffled from inside his costume. Under there, he was wearing glasses that sprayed threat data across his field of vision. "I see no mechanism of any kind." The kid walked toward them through the crowd, heading for the staging area for the contest. He was unspooling a trail of yellow-topped guards behind him, and they looked ready to blaze a path back to the safety of the vehicle should he be accosted. Again, this was no ambush. This was deterrent all the way. Zoey didn't understand, too focused in her cat to put it together. Zoey steeled herself and walked casually toward the approaching young man who was dressed like a cruel caricature of her, on a path to intercept him, but acting like she hadn't seen him yet. She felt her heart knocking on her sternum. She strode directly toward the kid, nearly bumped into him, and in her most shrill drunk girl voice said, "Oh my God!" She made a big show of looking the kid's costume up and down. "You even brought a real cat!" Zoey grabbed Wu's furry sleeve. "Dana, look!" The kid looked at Zoey, the recognition dawning on his face. Not that he was recognizing Zoey, but that he was recognizing her costume, as Zoey. Specifically, she was dressed as torture victim Zoey Ash. Echo's latex and makeup made her face look bloodied and beaten, her features swollen beyond recognition. She wore a cheap wig that vaguely mimicked a previous hairstyle, complete with blue streaks framing her face. She wore padding to exaggerate her figure and had loops of twisted, bloody wire around her neck and each wrist, as if she'd been bound up by a psychopath. Wu, meanwhile, was dressed in a cheap cat costume with white fur. Its markings had been quickly spray-painted to mimic stench machines, a black blotch down his face and chest. The genius in Echo's costume design was that Zoey was utterly unrecognizable under the costume of herself. Her eye color had been changed with a blue dye applied with drops that would look natural even under a microscope. Her actual breasts were taped down, well, kind of, underneath an uneven, lumpy, oversized bra. Her actual missing canine was replaced by a prosthetic tooth Echo had glued into the gap. Then, 2 random healthy teeth had been crudely painted black. Under the bad Zoey wig, strands of blonde leaked out. Her shoes added 2 inches to her height. Under the pale Zoey makeup were hints of a fake tan, the skin tone of half the girls in the city. She looked like a different, prettier woman trying to make herself comically ugly. The kid unenthusiastically said, "Cool." "I had a friend do the wound makeup. She has a 3D printer in her house. I had to split the $10,000 with her if I win. The cat costume is rented, but we painted it. Do you think we'll have to pay for it?" "I don't know." The young man was incredibly uncomfortable with the conversation and seemed like he wanted nothing more than for it to be over. In Zoey's ear, Echo said, 60 seconds out. Separate him from his detail as much as you can." Zoey, in her drunk girl voice, said, "I'm getting all of the Zoes together for a picture. We've got 4 so far. Come on." She grabbed his arm and pulled him along. He muttered some weak objection and glanced back at his security as he slowly walked with her. Zoey leaned in close to his ear and said, "Who are those guys? Are they in costume or are they, like, actual gunmen?" The kid said, They're with me. I'm actually not supposed to." "They're with you? Are you famous or something? Come on, 1 picture and we'll all get drinks." Zoey pulled him along a little faster, making a show of casting a playful look back at the kid's escorts, like she was making a girlish game of running away from them, inviting him to break the rules. The kid sped up to a trot to keep up with her, but glanced back nervously. "Hey, I'm not supposed to run. Hey." She kept urging him along, to limited success. 3 of the guards were jogging to close the gap, bumping through partygoers in offensive costumes, talking into their own radios, relaying instructions. Wu ran alongside Zoey, but his role was to ensure her safety. He would not, he made it clear, actively participate in an abduction. Zoey said, "How long now?" The kid turned as if to ask who she was just talking to as Echo answered in her ear. 30 seconds. Get him away from those guards." Zoey looked back at the kid and said, "Hey, why don't you have your goons wait here while we—" The kid dropped the cat carrier. Zoey heard a yelp and scratching from inside. The kid had to stop and retrieve it. He seemed to be breathing hard, like this little bit of exertion had been too much. That gave 3 members of his security detail time to catch up. One of them pointed a gun at Zoey. Another pointed a gun at Wu. The first one said, "I need to see some ID." The kid said, "It's fine. We're going to take a pic—" "Show me ID, now." The wind picked up, blowing around trash and dead leaves, whipping fake wig hair into Zoey's eyes. There was a noise from above, the sound of the air being battered to death by twin rotors. Everyone looked up. Zoey's rented stealth helicopter had arrived. Dangling from cables below the aircraft was an object much larger than the helicopter itself, hidden under a tarp that was flapping and snapping in the breeze. The object was lowered slowly to the ground, the helicopter setting it down in a spot in between Zoey and the row of vehicles from which the kid and his entourage had emerged. The cargo, the size of a house, hit the grass, and the helicopter detached the cable and flew away. The tarp fell to the ground, revealing Zoey's Halloween costume, the one that Santa's workshop had been grinding away at for more than 3 weeks. It stood on 4 huge pink legs. The crowd gasped and hooted and laughed. The guards started shouting commands at each other. Like all good costumes, this one required a fair amount of explaining to the uninitiated, which of course made it that much more impressive to the initiated. The design was based on a popular anime series called Our Hero Rio, which was about a little girl named Naoko and the tiny toy cat she keeps in her pocket. Thanks to a series of accidents involving magic and time travel, the toy cat had the ability to transform into a gigantic destructive mecha cat named Rio. The central joke of the series was that the giant cat was actually not useful for combating the many colorful, monstrous enemies that plagued the universe's Tokyo, because, even as an enormous mecha kitty, Rio only wanted to cuddle and make people happy. Zoey figured that last bit was either part of the fantasy, or cats were much different in Japan. So, about once an episode, this giant robotic cat would go bounding around, wreaking havoc, demanding pets from friend and foe alike, while puking up colorful gifts and farting pink clouds of floating hearts. The whole time, an exasperated Naoko would be frantically chasing after it, trying and failing to coax Rio into actually assisting their mission in some way. Zoey had always identified with Naoko for some reason. Zoey's Halloween costume, which was supposed to have made its debut at tomorrow's party to the delight of all the kids in attendance, included a 20-foot-tall mech made to look like it was part Rio and part stench machine. It had all the pink and white highlights of the cartoon character, with the coffee-stained coloring of Zoey's missing cat around its chest and chin, plus his spiked collar. Zoey herself was to be dressed like Naoko, that is, a 25th century schoolgirl, and would have controlled Stench Rio by remote. Echo was operating him at the moment. From the mouth of the giant cat robot came a booming, altered version of Zoey's recorded voice, loud enough to make the ground shake. "Meow! What's about to happen is not my fault!" That was a Rio catchphrase, but the vanguard of peace guards apparently weren't fans of the show. They opened fire with their ribbon guns, the weapon's bundle of 6 tiny barrels spraying holes into the torso of the cat-shaped mech. This had no effect whatsoever. Stench Rio was not, of course, designed to be outfitted with real weapons. It was only rigged to do a few Rio-esque tricks and phrases to impress the kids. However, if the yellow-jacketed guards looked closely, they would note that a bulky rifle had been hastily duct-taped to its chin. The cat took a few long strides toward the row of parked VOP armored vehicles and fired said rifle, launching a barrage of glowing projectiles the size of beer cans. Each landed on the hood of one of the VOP trucks with a clunk. Fearing a series of explosions, both guards and bystanders quickly backed away. Instead, each canister began sparking at the base, then emitting smoke. The projectiles each cut their way through the armored hood of the vehicles, spraying the engine compartments with a shower of thermite. A puddle of molten metal and plastic oozed out from around the front tires, like the vehicles were soiling themselves. Zoey was pretty far away from the action, but even from there the fumes were strong enough to burn her eyes. The VOP guards went nuts. Their means of evacuation now disabled, the men rapidly tried to coordinate with each other, ready to hustle their ward out of the crowd and into some backup vehicle. The 3 gunmen were closing in on Zoey and the kid now, 5 more heading their way. The cat, with its butt still facing Zoey's direction, crouched down and raised its haunches into the air, just like Rio in the cartoon. A compartment opened up, revealing a circular array of barrels aimed upward. The booming electronic Zoey voice said, "Meow, oh no, here it comes." Zoey ran over and grabbed the thoroughly bewildered kid and, trying to stay in character, said, "Oh my god, that thing is going to attack us, let's go!" She tugged at him and he sort of followed. Behind them, Zoey heard one of the guards say, "Hey, stay in sight!" The mecha cat said, "Hold your nose!" And from the barrels were farted dozens of canisters that landed on the lawn all around them. Upon impact, each spewed a thick pink cloud of smoke, belched forth in a series of heart shapes which then expanded and overlapped, reducing the visibility to 0. It smelled of strawberries, just like the cartoon cat's farts were said to. The children, Zoey thought, would have gone wild for this part. Zoey grabbed the kid, made sure he still had a grip on the cat carrier, and said, "It's poison! Get away from it! Don't breathe! Look, a guy back there just died! This way!" She pulled him along, and this time he followed without protest. The smoke was not poison, of course, but it did have a strong scent, and to a scared and confused young mind, it'd be easy to think it was getting harder to breathe, even if it was really the panic doing that. Zoey actually got lost in the smoke for a moment, but was able to track Woo's white furry shape ahead, hoping he was heading in the direction of fresh air. As the smoke got thinner, that only encouraged the kid to run more, until he was leading the way, swinging the cat carrier around in a careless manner that infuriated Zoey. The 3 of them stumbled into the clear and were immediately staring down the barrel of another gun. It was a guard in full Vanguard of Peace riot gear, gas mask, yellow chest plates. Then there was a buzz, and a large black and yellow drone lowered itself to aim an additional pair of barrels at Zoey. From the drone came an electronic voice that said, "Stop, or we will use deadly force. Lay flat on the ground." Zoey's chest was heaving, her hands on her hips. The kid looked so winded that he seemed on the verge of passing out. She looked back at the roiling pink cloud of smoke, knowing the rest of the VOP team were back there seconds away. The kid said, "It's okay, we're okay. Get down or we will shoot. You have 3 seconds. Woo did it first, keeping his costume paws raised, quickly going flat. Zoey followed suit, now hearing men shouting from behind her. Behind the guard and the drone, another VOP vehicle rolled to a stop, having plowed its way through decorations and food stands to intercept them. The rear door popped open. The guard yanked the kid over and pressed a gas mask to his face. "We've got you. Breathe normally." The guard, presumably into a radio, said, "We've secured him. Evacuating now." While the drone kept its weapons pointed down at Zoey, the guard shoved the kid and the cat carrier into the back of the vehicle. The guard then returned and said, "On your feet, both of you. You have been deemed a threat to our client, and by law and Vanguard of Peace policy, we are detaining you. Move." Zoey stumbled to her feet, and the guard roughly yanked her along, dragging her and shoving her into the vehicle with the kid. Wu climbed in, and the guard slammed the door. 28. The foot soldiers of the Vanguard of Peace were not, for the most part, morons. Or at least they weren't morons about being foot soldiers. As such, they tended to know where their vehicles were at any given moment and what they were doing. They also tended to notice if a vehicle was one of theirs and not, say, a rented yellow moving van with the sunny VOP logo hastily attached to the side. They further would notice if another guard was equipped with officially issued gear, or if they were wearing an improvised uniform and carrying a wildly unofficial railgun. The young man in the Zoey costume in the back of the vehicle could not have been expected to notice these differences, not in the middle of a heart-pounding escape from what must have seemed like a nerve gas attack from an oddly whimsical terrorist. The 8 pursuing guards, however, emerged from the pink smoke and knew exactly what had occurred. Their ward had been abducted into a strange vehicle and, for all they knew, was already dead. Inside the van, Zoey peered out the rear window and saw several guards rushing toward them, screaming orders. "Guys, we need to move!" Their own yellow-jacketed guard climbed into the passenger seat, turned, and said to the kid, "Let me see your hands." He did, and was confused to see they were suddenly in handcuffs. The guard ripped off the helmet to reveal Echo's face. Trying to sound intimidating, she said, "These are pacification cuffs. If they detect you struggling, you'll get a shock. If you run, you'll get a shock so hard that it will paralyze you for the next half hour. Just sit still and we won't hurt you." The kid said, Who are you?" Zoey said, "Damn it, they're already here. All of them." Wu pulled off his cat costume head, his hair matted with sweat. He peered out the window, but didn't need his fancy threat assessment glasses to tell him the obvious. "We didn't get enough separation from the guards." "What do we do? Guys?" From the driver's seat, Will said, "Hang on." He hit the accelerator, but while the rear wheels were still spinning in the grass, the two nearest guards fired the weapons, aiming low. The impact shook the vehicle, and the van sank several inches on one side. Smoke drifted up past the windows, as if the wheels were being melted from under them. The electric engine whined, but with half the wheels disabled, the van only skidded around in a sad, wobbly donut. Will muttered a curse. The rest of the guards quickly encircled them. Wu unzipped the cat costume and peeled it off using his one good arm. Underneath were black fatigues and a vest that he had told Zoey could stop most bullets. She probably should have asked for one of those. He checked the projectile bracelet on his wrist, probably counting his shots. Outside, two of the guards fired again, taking out the other two wheels. For the third time in 2 days, Zoey was trapped in a completely immobile metal box and surrounded by enemies. That was the kind of thing that almost used to never happen to her. Will punched away at controls and, almost sounding calm, said, "Buy us more time. I don't care how." Echo brought up her phone. "What else can the cat do?" Zoey watched the ring of guards close around them and said, Not much. Hit the last button, the puke thing." Echo tapped her phone. A pair of guards approached the rear doors, testing to see if they were locked. They were. Same with the side door. Instructions were shouted back and forth, and they jogged away, presumably to get equipment to cut their way in. The nearest guard shouted, "Exit the vehicle with your hands in the air and lie flat on the ground. Leave all weapons behind. If we have to enter the vehicle, we can and will use lethal force. This is your final warning and your final opportunity to end this without bloodshed." Zoey looked nervously back at Will. "Should we say something?" He glanced into the side mirror. Looks like they're about to get their answer. Moments later, Stench Rio came bounding through the pink smoke. The guards turned to face the giant catbot and shot at it some more. It was now so full of holes that it would probably whistle when the wind blew. The cat opened its mechanical mouth. Zoe's electronic voice said, "Oh no, I hope there isn't an expensive rug. Blah." 500 small plastic tubes came flying out, like a spray of vomit. "Meow, please give your moms these free tubes of Crazy Daisy mood-enhancing cream or whatever it's called. These have not been tested by the FDA." The guards fell back and took cover behind the van, presumably thinking the tubes would explode or something. But no, they were just skin cream. That at the moment seemed to be doing nothing to enhance anyone's mood. The hostage watched all this happen from inside, eyes wide. "Who are you people?" The VOP team spent several minutes analyzing the projectiles before deciding it was safe to refocus their attention on the van. The guard who left earlier returned with a small tool. Echo said, "We've got about 30 seconds before they cut their way in." She pulled a blade out of her boot. Zoey had no weapons. The guy with the tool pressed it to the back door, and there was a hiss and smoke. Blue light reflected off his faceplate. Zoey looked back to Will and said, "If we just toss the kid back out there—" "That won't matter. Not now." The noise from the cutting tool stopped. The guards approached in formation. They yelled their warning again, demanding they all surrender, lie down, take the peaceful way out. Zoey backed away from the door. "Somebody? Will, go talk to them. Do your thing." Will said nothing, didn't even turn to look back at her. The lead guard came up and yanked open the door. He aimed a gun at them and said, "Come out and—" Someone shouted from behind him. He looked up. Wind was kicking up dust around them again, the mini hurricane that accompanied the helicopter wherever it went. Zoey couldn't see the aircraft itself from inside the vehicle, but knew what it was there to do. Finally. There was a heavy metallic thunk above them, magnetic hooks clamping onto the roof of the van. Will said, "Grab something." There was a hard upward jolt, and then they were rising, hauled up and away by the helicopter. The rear doors were wide open, air rushing in. Then, the van abruptly tilted backward, threatening to spill everyone out into the ground below. Zoey grabbed the nearest rigid object she could find. They continued to rise. Zoey happened to register something skidding along the floor, and she realized with terror that it was the cat crate. She reached out, missed it. Echo stepped in with a foot, hooking it just before it reached the open door. Zoey stared out, watching the train wreck party falling away below them, the guards shrinking into a little circle of yellow specks, zombie vultures circling overhead. Their hostage yelled over the howling wind, "What is happening?" The helicopter lurched forward, and the van tilted in the other direction, gravity sliding everyone toward the front. The door slammed shut but wouldn't latch, as that mechanism had been destroyed by the guards. Wu reached out and held the door shut with his one good hand, and used the other hand to hook a cargo strap with his elbow. After several minutes, they leveled out, and in the relative calm, everyone stared at each other as if to reassure themselves that they had somehow pulled that off. Wu actually barked out a laugh, and Zoey was suddenly reminded that, contrary to what he may say, the man lived for this kind of thing. Echo surveyed the interior and said, "Everyone okay? Do we need to do a roll call? Make sure nobody fell out?" Zoey crawled back toward the plastic cat carrier, but already she knew. She sensed it, but also she smelled it. She pulled open the latch, and inside saw a random skinny white cat. Maybe a stray they'd caught. Zoey looked back at Echo and just shook her head. The hostage kid looked more confused than ever. Will, no longer needing to operate the now airborne van, left the driver's seat and braced himself against the wall. The kid turned and registered who he was seeing. Blood drained from his face. Urine pooled around his shoes. The kid tore his gaze off of Will to look at Wu, then Zoey, piecing it together. Zoey had never seen anyone as afraid as that teenager was in that moment. She almost felt bad for him. Almost. She peeled the itchy latex makeup off of her face. The helicopter apparently was turning in the air, the whole van tilting sideways. She had to reach out to brace herself once more. She said to the hostage, "We may not have stench machine, but we have you. Tell me where he is." The kid looked back and forth between Zoey and Will. Who is?" "Fine." To Will, she said, "If someone else has him down at the park, I won't even know where to start. Tell Bud and Andre it's on them now. They're our last hope." She stared down the hostage. And his last hope, too. 29. The helicopter flew itself to a pre-programmed destination, the main storage lot of Move Keens, the rental service where they'd gotten the van after every option for a tactical vehicle had fallen through. They needed a place to put it now that it was surely being tracked, and this was as good a spot as any. The helicopter lowered the van and its passengers onto the lot, then hovered nearby for want of a clear landing spot. Zoey left a note on the dash of the van, apologizing for changing the logo and getting the rear latch destroyed, and the wheels melted, and pissing in it. Then the four of them hustled over to the helicopter itself, Zoey wondering what complex mechanism would be used to raise them up to the aircraft that was suspended about 10 feet above the ground. It turned out to just be a goddamned ladder, a flimsy one that unfurled itself from the bottom of the side door. They climbed up one by one, Zoey feeling like the wind from the rotors would toss her off of it at any moment. Their hostage made no effort to escape. When push comes to shove, almost everyone complies. Once inside, they slammed the door and the aircraft swept into the sky, coughing out shimmering airbursts that downed several drones that tried to follow. Echo sat in the cockpit and said, "No fewer than 4 full-sized VOP aircraft have taken flight in search of us." Zoey thought that seemed like a lot just to prevent her from getting her cat back. Then again, up to that moment, she hadn't known that the Vanguard of Peace had an air force at all. Will, however, seemed prepared for this, and said their helicopter would enter a stealth holding pattern outside the city. Lights off, invisibility skin on, engines in quiet mode, skimming over hills in a way that would make it very hard to find. For a while, at least. Thus, within minutes, they were flying low and slow, the glow and flicker of Tabula Rasa's animated skyline flashing and pulsing in the distance. They needed to remain ready and undetected in order to extract the 2-man screw team of Andre and Bud if things went off the rails, or the 2-men plus stench machine screw team if things went well. It was then that the kid, still in his crude Zoey costume, apparently found an opening to make his case. "Look, you guys, I understand things got way out of hand. I'm really sorry about that. We can work something out." Zoey cut him off. "We can set those handcuffs to shock you if you talk. Do we have to do that, or can you just voluntarily shut up?" That wasn't a feature of the cuffs as far as she knew, but the kid seemed to buy it. or at least the sentiment behind it. Do we have some kind of hood or something we can put on him? I don't like him staring at me. Does this helicopter have a cabinet full of hostage-taking supplies somewhere? Echo gave Zoey a disapproving look, but then said, I guess it's better if we're not keeping him in the loop on everything we're doing. Hold on. She found a headset in the cockpit, disconnected it, and used it to cover the kid's ears. They did not in fact have a hood or a blindfold, but Zoey put the head from Woo's cat costume on the kid, turned backward so he couldn't see out. His cuffed hands were trembling. He smelled like pee. Zoey had a fleeting feeling like this was all a weird dream she was having. They started this, she thought. If everyone had just kept to themselves, none of them would be here. She'd be at home in her pajamas, prepared to curl up with a bottle of something, and looking forward to not attending the Black Parade. Will said, I've got Andre. He put the call on the monitor. Zoey thought he and Bud would both be wearing black burglar clothes and draped in grappling hooks, but they were just dressed like they always were, sitting in what looked like a bar from the Old West. Visible in the background was a mechanical old-timey bartender who was frozen in place while wiping a glass, probably designed to get shot in the face by an animatronic cowboy at some point in the evening. Zoey asked, Are you guys drinking? This place is closed, said Bud. We let ourselves in. I'm buddies with the owner. It's just outside the industrial park. We're being watched from the skies. Needed to get indoors. Will's text said you came up empty. Zoey glanced over at their hostage. Sort of. We don't have stench machine. Otherwise, everything went perfectly. You should have been there. Andre said, Well, no unusual activities so far at the Screw. Or nothing that looks unusual to us. It is our first time watching that place. We've parked a jammer drone on the roof. When we turn it on, it'll kill any outgoing blink feeds. And they'll know it too. Or they'll know they're blocked, but hopefully it will take a while to figure out why. The idea is if they want to eat your kitty on live broadcast, they'll hold off if they know they've gone dark. No audience. That'll stop them from eating him, said Zoey, but won't stop them from killing him. Bud said, We're banking on them wanting the whole, meat preparation process on camera for maximum effect. Zoey was about to answer, but choked on the words. Andre quickly jumped in. So, the stacks of storage units weren't built to be residential. Obviously, there's no gas running to the building. Everything's electric. Figure if there's no power, there's probably nothing to cook with. We're, well, assuming they're not intending to eat a raw animal. Zoey absolutely did not want to cry in this situation, in front of these people. She made herself nod. At least the hostage couldn't see her. Now, you've got the Pitts factory next door, said Bud. The grasshopper farm on the other side. Trucks coming in and out of both at all hours. Next thing is we'll arrange a little accident. Nothing fatal, but if we do it just right, it'll knock out the power and also trigger a hazardous materials warning and evacuate the building. For the emergency crews that come, herding these people should be like trying to catch a fart with a fork. They should draw in a bunch of drones to see what's going on, one of which will be ours, which will be carrying our infrared scanner. If whoever's holding the cat evacuates him, we'll find him in the crowd and track him from there. If they leave him behind in the building, even better. We'll have a clear path to slip in to get him. We've got disguises for that part. Andre added, One way or the other, the whole evacuation and cleanup procedure should take hours, maybe all night. With any luck, it won't be until they all file back into the joint after the all clear when they'll be like, Damn, cat's gone. You've already got a rendezvous point programmed in, said Bud. A soccer field not too far from here. You pick us up, we'll all go home and have a good laugh about it. Assuming the cat is there at all, grunted Will, and they're not already set up at some third location. Zoey flicked a hand at him. Hush. All right, guys, when do you go in? Bud answered, As soon as our truck turns down this street here, which is right now. Absolutely nothing happened for a solid minute. Sorry, it looked a lot closer on the tracker. Here it comes. The monitor switched to a drone feed, looking down on a tanker truck as it rumbled into the industrial park. Andre's voice was still audible in the feed. We're already in control of this one. The semi suddenly weaved in the road, swerving across the center line and back again. It didn't look like they had that much control. Still, the truck did a passable job keeping in its lane, until it was time to not to. It suddenly veered to the right, jolting off the road and bashing through a chain-link fence, rumbling through the parking lot of the Screw. It ran through the outdoor cafe tables and chairs, knocking them aside like doll furniture. The truck then careened and overturned, the tanker skidding on its side and slamming into the base of the building, sprays of liquid flying in arcs, splashing against the walls. Then the tanker ruptured completely, and several thousand gallons of human urine washed in waves over a junction box that the crash itself had already knocked askew. Sparks flew. There was a flash and a sharp clap, like a tiny explosion. Lights blinked, and then, a moment later, the screw went dark. The feed cut back to Andre, looking relieved. He wiped his forehead. Just like I planned. Next to him, Bud watched the immediate aftermath on his phone. Guards are swarming the truck, thinking it's a suicide attack. Give them time, they'll conclude otherwise. Even if they scent shenanigans are at hand, it don't matter. The spill's gonna send ammonia fumes up into those boxes, and they've got no real ventilation. Everyone will have to be cleared out at the orders of the property owners, whether they want to go or not. Andre said, They don't want to get sued after a bunch of unemployed nerds get pissed-lun. He stood. We have to get in a costume. Echo switched the feed over to the drone, which was circling the screw. Down in the darkness, flashlight beams were whipping around the scene of the crash, and people could be heard yelling questions and accusations, the beginnings of the chaos they needed for their plan to have any hope of working. Echo said, 2 more VOP aircraft have taken to the sky. They will find us. Will glanced at some dots on his monitor, which presumably marked the location of said aircraft. That was inevitable. Once they do, it'll just confirm that we're not heading toward the screw. It's fine if they find us, as long as they don't find Bud and Andre. Zoey said, Can't they shoot us down? They can, if they try hard enough. All helicopters are made to crash, but they won't try, not as long as we have him on board. He nodded toward the hostage. Why would they care about... Zoe's words faded. She turned from the monitor and studied Will's face. Then she got up, went over to the kid, and pulled off his furry costume head and headphones. The kid's face was covered in beads of sweat, either from fear or due to the costume apparently being designed to cook its wearer alive. His eyes were wide, looking like he'd spent his brief time in sensory deprivation imagining various torture scenarios he'd have to endure. Zoey said, You. What's your name? This question really confused the kid. I don't... You know my name. Yes, the blowback. Tell me your real name, the one you were born with. The kid once again looked back and forth from Zoey to Will, looking like he'd been asked a question in a foreign language he didn't understand and was hoping someone would translate. Will, looking very much like he already knew the answer, said, Tell her. Marty? Said the kid, like he was now scared that he was giving the wrong answer to a trick question. The whole name. Marty Chob. 30. Zoey stared at Will. So we just abducted Titus Chob's son. And you don't seem worried or surprised by this. Will didn't answer. Meaning you knew that's what we were doing. I strongly suspected. Marty gestured toward the cat crate. Did you think that was really yours? It's just part of the costume. Will said, I know. Your father's executing a misinformation campaign to mobilize an insurrection against our organization, and you are involved to some degree. Your father may not have understood how seriously we take this sort of thing, but I believe he knows now. Do you? Marty swallowed. Are you going to kill me? He seemed to visualize himself being thrown from the helicopter, after having first been skinned alive and set on fire. No, I didn't even know who you were. Even if Will apparently did, and he and I will have a discussion about that shortly, we're not the villains here. You attacked me with a giant robot and kidnapped me into an invisible helicopter. Will asked, Did your father know you're going to the park tonight? No, I'm supposed to be at home in bed, but that security detail follows me wherever I go. I couldn't get away from them. It sucks. Tell me about Dexter Tilley. Zoey stopped him. No, Will, how about you tell me about Marty? When did you know that's who we had? I suspected it was him in the photo. Had about the same build. But I didn't understand why Titus would send him out as bait, even with the guards at the stupid risk, so I assumed it was a ploy, that they'd swap in someone else. And you didn't feel the need to share any of this with me? You've just got your own agenda over there. On the feed, there was the sound of an explosion and shouting. She turned to the monitor. It had gone dark. What happened? Echo, trying not to sound alarmed, said, There was a flash, like something blew up, and then we lost the drone. Lost the connection or lost the actual drone? I don't know. Because the drone has the CAT scanner thing, right? The heat signature scanner? Will said, We have to head out there. If we do that, interjected Wu, They will detect our approach long before we arrive and intercept us at the rendezvous point. They can prevent us from landing or from taking off again. They'll have many options once they realize where we are going." "We, on the other hand, have just the one option," answered Will. "The VOP can close the roads in every direction leading out of the industrial park, so we're Andre and Bud's only chance for extraction, and we can't let Schaub take them into custody, not as long as we have his son. That would go badly." "Then I recommend that Zoe and I be landed in a safe location before you do the extraction, since, as you said, you have put her in greater danger by sealing her in a vehicle with Titus Schaub's captive son." Zoe waved him off. "You know I'm not doing that. Bud and Andre are out there because of me. I need to be there." Will shook his head. "He's actually right. And this isn't a sexism thing. It's bad strategy. Taking you into the teeth of whatever has happened there puts you in danger of falling into Schaub's hands. If he gets you, he gets total control over the situation." "Then we make sure he doesn't get me. You wouldn't be saying this if it was my father sitting here instead of me." "If I agree with that statement, then you'll say I'm holding you to a different standard. If I disagree, you'll say, well, I'm not your father. So what's the point of responding at all? You've already made up your mind." Zoe studied the monitor, the one with the map showing the 6 angry red dots. "If we run into one of the bad guys' helicopters, can we shoot it down?" Echo said, "You want to shoot down a helicopter over a populated city? You've seen what one of those looks like when it crashes, right?" "You know I have." "So we're going?" "Turning around now. You'll feel us banking." They tilted, heading toward the industrial park in a situation that had apparently gone badly awry. Zoe figured that, in retrospect, they probably should have predicted that. "Hey, Marty," said Zoe. "Whose cat is that?" He shrugged. Just a stray, I guess. It hangs around my dad's ranch. We need to get him water. When we get somewhere safe, I mean." "Okay." They flew for a moment. He wouldn't even look down at the cat, just a costume prop to him. She said, "I want to ask you a question." "Okay." "Why? Why all of this? Why come after me?" I wasn't really a part of that. Yes, you were. Come on." I don't know. It just got out of hand, like I said." "Got out of hand?" "You wouldn't understand." People say that to me 10 times a day. Why wouldn't I understand?" "Because you're not a guy." "Explain it to me, then. Tell me what it's like." Marty looked hard at her, searching for a way to phrase it. "It's like everyone is laughing at you all the time, and all you want to do is shut them up. I absolutely feel like that." He scoffed. "Everyone thinks girls are God's perfect little angels. You're never in the wrong. Always the innocent victims, always calm and wise and perfect. And nothing is ever your fault. If a boy cheats on a girl, it's because he's scum. If a girl cheats on a boy, it's because he didn't treat her right. Get this cat water when we get somewhere safe." He didn't reply. They flew in tense silence, Zoe watching out a window as the glimmering city oozed under them, white strands of street lights and headlights crisscrossing and pulsing. A spider's web, Zoe thought, waiting for her to descend, get entangled, and be bled dry. She jumped when the monitor suddenly blinked back on. Andre's face appeared on the screen. He was covered in sweat and appeared to be running. An ominous red glow washed over the landscape behind him. "Can you hear me?" he grunted. "There's been a complication." Will rushed over. "We're just a few minutes out." Andre stopped to swat away something that was jumping at his face. It looked like a large insect. They were swirling all around him, black specks backlit by the hellish light in the sky. It looked like a biblical apocalypse. "No, abort! There's no place to land. We're going to get snatched up no matter what." "That's not an option," barked Will. "Can you get to the top of a—" "No. Will, tell Zoe the cat isn't here." "Andre, listen. Go to the—" "They're here. Gotta go." There was more shouting from off-screen, and the feed went dark. Echo said, "We're 4 minutes out." Will looked toward the cockpit. "Have we been detected?" "Not that I can tell." "Turn around." Zoe was about to override him, tell him to go in anyway. Then she heard Echo gasp at what she saw on the horizon. Zoe moved to the cockpit. They were coming up on the sprawl of low buildings that was the industrial park, from their height looking like an array of miniature models on a table. Perched in the middle of them was what looked to Zoe like a glowing Japanese lantern someone had set down among the models, casting a gently pulsing light on everything around it. The stars directly above it were shrouded behind a pillar of smoke. It was the screw, and it was on fire.